think about it every day. She really wasn't supposed to be there.
I'm not gonna hurt you.
There's the only way to describe it as a sick feeling. Just so innocent.
Tara Anderson arrives for her usual shift at Captain D's. This Sunday, she finds it strange that the door is locked. Her boss should be there by now, and the chairs should be down for the Sunday lunch crowd. But the place looks empty. Tara tries calling the restaurant. No answer. Something is wrong. She calls the police. An area manager shows up about 20 minutes later with a key.
Steve?
You really can't tell anything had occurred. It's very clean. The cash registers are closed. The safe is closed.
Lunch prep is underway, but where is everyone? The manager makes his way to the back of the restaurant.
Opens up the cooler and he finds the bodies.
Hey! Hey! Hey!
It's an unbelievable scene. Homicide detective Pat Postiglione is assigned to the case.
You could tell that the victims were shot as they were lying down. They were shot several times each. It is overkill.
The dead employees are 16-year-old Sarah Jackson and the restaurant's manager, 28-year-old Steve Hampton, a father of 3.
Steve was a dad, happily married, having a good life and a good career apparently at Captain D's.
Sarah had been working at the restaurant for 8 months. Across town, a police officer delivers the news that breaks her mother's heart.
He asked me if I was Sarah Jackson's mother, and I said yes. And he told me that there'd been a robbery and that they had been found shot in the cooler, and I said, is she dead? And he said, yes. Sarah was your typical teenage girl. She was going to school, working, had just bought a car and had it for 2.5 weeks. And she was the happiest she could be with that car. Just your typical teenager.
Detective Postiglione learns $7,500 in small bills and coins is missing. Not a lot of money to die for.
These victims, we suspect, were convinced that we're going to put you in a cooler, I'm going to rob you, and I'm going to be out of here. They went in there and then they were killed immediately. Didn't have any time to react.
If you think about what she had to have felt, you know, it's not good.
Who could commit such a heinous crime? A suspect clever enough to lock the door behind him.
Which would give you a lot more time to get away. It's all delaying the discovery of the victims is what that's about.
The execution of Sarah Jackson and Steve Hampton shocks all of Nashville.
It's a tragedy. You don't expect to get out of church on Sunday and find out that one of your members has been shot.
As police are working to piece together what happened, co-workers and friends are just trying to understand why anyone would murder a helpless teenager and a father of 3.
Investigators ask employees if anything unusual happened recently. Staff from the night before say a man came in shortly after closing time looking for a job.
He said he was a cook. He said he wanted to work for Captain D's.
They'll take a look at it today.
They gave him a job application. He left with a job application.
Employees pour through hundreds of police photographs. Not one of them sees the job applicant. but they can describe him.
They said he was a big, tall male white, possibly in his 20s and 30s. They described him being very muscular.
The police learned Sarah Jackson left for work at 8:30 in the morning, arriving at Captain D's 10 minutes later. Around 9, a woman on her way to church notices some activity at the restaurant entrance.
She remembers seeing Steve Hampton standing there, holding the door with his foot, speaking to a tall male who had a white piece of paper in his hand.
Oh, yes, sure. Come on.
The man she describes matches the man applying for the job the night before. Another witness sees that same man leaving the restaurant at 9:20. That means at 9 o'clock, Steve Hampton was alive. 20 minutes later, he was dead.
We suspected that the person that came in the night before is the same person that came the following day and killed Steve and Sarah.
If robbery is the motive, why execute two innocent young people? A disturbing possibility emerges.
The person that committed this type of crime is somewhat of a psychopath, was bent on killing his witnesses.
Police soon get another break. This time from a man picking up cans on a highway 11 miles from the crime scene.
He had found some items that belonged to Steve Hampton. It's a 1 in a million as far as we're concerned, because typically when people are walking along the highway, they find something, they don't even call the police. That's unusual.
Steve's wife tells police he had $600 in his wallet the morning he was killed. Money to pay their rent. The killer stole the cash, but tossed out his ID and credit cards.
We did recover a partial fingerprint on one of the cards.
They knew it wasn't Mr. Hampton's print, so that was the best lead they had.
The print is entered into a regional database.
In the event this person had been arrested in their state, we'd hopefully get a hit on it. Didn't get any hits on it.
Detective Postiglione starts putting in long days.
We were really hot and heavy on this. There's different people that we're looking at. We're trying to deal with the families. We're trying to assure them that we're going to find the person that did this to their loved ones.
I talk to Pat almost every day, and him talking to me made me feel better. Even if he didn't have any new news, just talking to me helped.
What the detective does not tell Sarah's mother is a growing fear.
This is nothing that we get on a regular basis. It's very unique. Based on the nature of the crime, this person may do something like this again. 5
weeks later, he does.
911 emergency call. This is 911. What's wrong?
The murders of fast food workers Steve Hampton and Sarah Jackson are wildly out of character for Nashville, Tennessee.
Still got a lot of people treat you like you're in a small town. A lot of people know each other.
This is Music City, usually fun, laid back, easygoing. Not now. Now, Nashville is scared to death.
It paralyzed the city because you have two completely innocent victims just gunned down like this for robbery. It was almost unheard of.
This is 911. Hello, this is 911. What's going on? Somebody what? What's wrong? You do not speak English? Are you hurt? Do you need an ambulance?
The dispatcher traces the call to a McDonald's on Lebanon Road, 2 miles from Captain D's.
The police get there. It looks like there may be someone inside. That's when they break the glass. The scene at McDonald's was extremely bloody because we had multiple victims.
Amid the carnage, a twitch. One victim is alive. They rush him to the hospital. The killer made off with $2,300, a lot of it in coins. The same M.O. as Captain D's.
There's the only way to describe it as a sick feeling. Please don't tell me this is still going.
The victims are 17-year-old Andrea Brown, 23-year-old Robert Sewell, 27-year-old Ronald Santiago, the manager. Jose Gonzalez, the man who made the 911 call, is 30. Gonzalez is the only witness, and his life hangs by a thread.
He was critical, extremely critical.
Police worry the killer may try to silence him for good.
We had him under protective custody, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and he was never out of our sight.
Once again, Nashville is gripped by fear.
The entire city is in a panic. Here are 5 innocent people that had been executed for really no apparent reason.
Fast food workers quit in droves.
People were really getting antsy about the risk of working in fast food restaurants. Parents would be hesitant about their kids working these fast food type jobs. And there was definitely a mood and an air.
With 5 young people dead and a killer out there somewhere, the police are feeling the heat.
The chief is asking us every day what's happening, and we're just focusing and concentrating on solving these crimes.
They felt probably if they could have solved the first one, maybe they wouldn't have had 3 other victims, so they were really running themselves on the ground trying to solve the case.
You can't help but become involved because it's so innocent.
Two weeks go by with no solid leads. Investigators' hopes rest on Jose Gonzalez, the lone survivor of the bloody massacre at McDonald's.
He was only able to motion with his hands, and we asked him, how many people did this to you? He held up one finger. Was he white or was he black? Hold up one finger for white, 2 fingers for black. He held up one finger, he was white.
As Gonzalez recovers, he describes in more detail what happened that night at closing time. At 11 o'clock, the 4 McDonald's employees are about to leave.
He waited till the restaurant was closing. He was waiting outside with a gun, forced them all back.
He orders the manager to open the safe. Then he herds the employees into the cooler.
Once they got in there and they realized what was going on, they understood that this was probably the same guy from Captain D's.
He'd fired 6 times. He shot each victim in the head twice. By the time he got to Mr. Gonzalez, he ran out of ammunition, and at that time, before he could reload, Mr. Gonzalez jumped up.
Jose grabbed him around the waist, and he was doing the best he could. The suspect was stabbing him up in the neck area, this way in the back of the neck, shoulder area, stabbing him straight in and in the back. Thought he killed him and left him for dead.
One problem for the detectives. Gonzalez's description of the killer doesn't match the sketch of the Captain D suspect. Does that mean there could be 2 killers?
We had nothing to physically link the 2 scenes together other than they were similar in nature.
Detective Postiglione's gut tells him they're looking for one man.
We have 2 restaurants that are approximately 2.2 miles apart, where you have somebody go in and rob and kill everybody inside. We felt that it was very likely to happen again.
With almost 500 fast food outlets in Nashville, anticipating where the killer will strike next is like looking for a needle in a haystack. They put surveillance on as many as they can.
We had to pick and choose places we thought that this person may go after. We had 20 to 30 detectives working on a regular basis, hoping that this person would try to hit them while we were there. But unfortunately, that didn't occur.
It's the biggest manhunt in Nashville history. But 2 months after the Captain D's killings and the slaughter at McDonald's, all police have is a partial fingerprint and 2 different composites. There's not a single suspect in sight.
The police had made a huge thing of, what a big effort they were making. I think they would have to acknowledge they were somewhat embarrassed by, here's this guy walking around for weeks and weeks, and nobody had any idea he was in their midst.
It's been over 2 months since the fast food killing started. 5 people are dead. Fear grips the city of Nashville, and a police force struggles to find a phantom killer.
It was really, really high-intensity pressure from everybody.
It's almost closing time at Baskin-Robbins in Clarksville, an hour's drive outside of Nashville. 16-year-old Michelle Mays and 21-year-old Angela Holmes are finishing up. Michelle calls her mom to arrange a ride home.
I told her brother was going to come pick her up, and she asked me to make her potato soup. I remember the conversation always. She said, please, Mom, please, I'm hungry. And I said, well, we'll see. And she says, okay, I've got to go. Somebody came in. And I said, okay, I love you. And she says, I love you.
10 minutes later, Michelle's brother, Craig, arrives to pick her up. He waits.
He called me and said, something's weird. He said, the lights are on, and I don't see anybody cleaning.
Craig looks inside. No sign of his sister. No sign of Angela. No sign of anyone. He calls 911.
We knew something was wrong. The only thing you're thinking about is, where are my girls? Where are the girls, and why are they not here?
20 minutes later, Clarksville police arrive at the Baskin-Robbins.
There were no signs of any struggle inside the building. No tables turned over. The safe had been open, and there was no money in the safe. The teal drawers, they were open, and money was gone. Obviously, we've got a robbery here. The girls not being there and us not being aware of where they are, they've been kidnapped. They're gone.
You just don't know what to think. You want to hope for the best. They're going to be brought back, and you're going to hug them and, never let them leave your side again. So many things run through your mind.
Local media jump on the story.
It appears that these people were doing their routine jobs of closing the business down, and now they're not there.
So from the sky and on the ground, they began an all-out search at daybreak for the 2 missing Baskin-Robbins employees.
We're going to saturate this area from Warfield Boulevard all the way into town.
We just waited and waited, and just waiting and praying and hoping that something would happen.
Next morning, 3 miles away, a man is out for a stroll.
Reports to a park ranger at Dunbar Cave State Park that he has found a body in a shallow part of the lake.
Police, I'm down at Dunbar State Park.
I was getting ready for work, and I had the news on. And as soon as I heard it, I felt like in my gut that this may be connected.
Angela Holmes was found in a very shallow area next to the bank in a face-down position.
Police discover Michelle's body in the woods, 100 feet from Angela.
Both of the girls suffered stab wounds and then a knife cut to the throat.
Multiple stab wounds.
It was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and a neighbor of ours was listening on the radio. They found some bodies at Dunbar Cave.
So a man walking his dog.
I knew, you know, we just knew. She wanted to be a marine biologist. She always told me that she was going to be famous one day. I don't know where she got it, but she talked all the time, and she never stopped. I used to say, Michelle, please just be quiet for 1 minute, you know, and now I would give anything just to hear her voice again.
I said, this is Kim, and they said, we're calling about Angie's, murder. That was the first time I'd heard that word, and so that was really, really difficult. Angie was gone.
Angela was married with a young child. She was going to nursing school and working part-time.
She was the overachiever, typical first child. She was so intelligent. She graduated seventh in her class, and she was their class president. She was very popular. She was a good girl.
The coroner determines that both women were viciously attacked. Michelle had 14 stab wounds. Angela was almost decapitated.
What I saw with those two ladies was definitely overkill. Yeah.
Same MO. It was pretty obvious that it was the same person, and it struck again.
7 people, all fast food workers, all murdered in the past 10 weeks. The brutality of the killings forces Detective Postiglione to a chilling conclusion.
Maybe it was more than just a robbery. Maybe he was now enjoying the killing, too.
Is it scary? Yes, it's scary. If you have these types of crimes from Nashville to Clarksville, where are they going to go next?
Police set up a tip line. One woman says she saw a red car at the ice cream shop at closing time. Another witness reports seeing a similar car at Dunbar State Park a half hour later.
This red car just kept surfacing. So that red car to us was at least something. It was one of the more significant things that we had was, who is the owner of this red car?
Clarksville police set up roadblocks. Does anyone know who owns the car?
Thousands of cars were stopped. Did any of that generate anything? No.
The Nashville area is on edge. The police under the gun, helpless. Nothing is panning out, and the questions on everyone's mind: where is he? Who is he? And when will he strike again? A quiet Sunday night in Nashville. Mitch Roberts, a manager at a Shoney's restaurant, is relaxing at home with his family.
My son was filming our pet golden retriever. We were going to have to put him down. And all of a sudden you hear a knock on the door, and he pans the camera up and looks. We had our front door open and just the solid glass storm door, and Paul standing in the doorway.
Paul Reed was a short order cook at Shoney's until Mitch fired him. He's totally unexpected.
Oh, yeah. What are you doing here? Well, I know it's late.
Proceeded to tell me that he'd like to get his job back, and that's why he stopped by to see if I would rehire him. He was looking for work. I had a little bit of funny feeling about it.
I'm really desperate, Mr. Roberts.
My wife said, this guy's creepy. Something's wrong. Get rid of him. So I told him I would basically try to work with him, but I would do that tomorrow. So I let him out on the front porch, and that's when he told me he had proof that people were stealing from Shoney's, and he could prove it to me. He had it in the trunk of his car, and he wanted me to come see. He opened the trunk and showed me the steaks that I recognized immediately as prepackaged steaks from Shoney's.
And your employees have been stealing from you.
He was driving a small red car, and it clicked. That's what they were looking for in the murders and investigation.
Mr. Roberts, I got to deal with this now. You know what, Paul?
I knew that I needed to try to get back in the house, to get away from him. He ran around in front of me and pulled a gun.
This is not a laughing matter, Mr. Roberts.
And took a pair of handcuffs out of his pocket and handed them to me and told me to put them on.
I need you to put those on for me.
And I told him, I said, Paul, this is a joke, it's not funny. And he said, it's not a joke.
Mr. Roberts.
I'm not saying I was brave, I was scared to death. And I said, now I'm going back in the house. You call me tomorrow. And I walked away from him. And as I got to the steps on the front porch, I thought, you might ought to look and see what he's doing. So I looked around and he had switched and put the gun in his one hand and had a knife about 10 inches long in the other. And I looked back at him, I said, Paul, I don't want to hurt you and I don't think you want to hurt me. Put that up. So as I turned back away from him, I'm not ashamed to tell you, I said, Lord, tell me what to do, because I'm going to fight him on the porch. He's not getting back in the house to my family. He didn't expect me to wheel and turn and hit him with my fist in the chest. And as I backed him up, his eyes got real big. It's a miracle he didn't shoot me. And I held the door and he pulled on it 3 times, trying to get in. And I screamed to my wife, hand me the gun, it's laying right there.
It's laying right there.
Paul bought the bluff.
The gun, hand me the gun.
There was no gun there.
Hand me the gun, it's laying right there.
And he ran. And I got the storm door locked, the front door pushed to and locked. He got in his car and he left. I called the police. I'm lucky. Just by the grace of God, I'm here today talking to you. Because he didn't mean for me to be.
Well, he was asking me to put the handcuffs on and
Put the handcuffs on yourself.
A deputy came out, we filed a report, and as the deputy was leaving, my phone rings. It's Paul.
Reed wants to know if he can patch things up. Mitch says yes.
Yeah, I'll be here.
And so I talked him into coming back.
The officer at the scene calls for backup. They wait. 45 minutes later, Reed returns with another man in a pickup truck. Reed is charged with the attempted kidnapping of his former boss. Mitch Roberts is stunned. This isn't the Paul Reed he knows.
He was a very well-mannered young guy. He always said yes, sir, no, sir, when I asked him something. Always wanted to work more, would stay late, later than his shift called for if I needed him to. He was a example employee.
Until one day in February of 1997.
He threw one of the plates, serving plates, at the dish machine and hit a young lady. I dismissed him and told him to go home, that was unacceptable.
The next morning, Steve Hampton and Sarah Jackson are gunned down in Captain D's. Nashville police run a routine check to see if Reed has any priors.
In Texas, he had been in prison for armed robberies, similar type fast food restaurants in Houston.
Witnesses in those restaurants put Reed behind bars. He served 7 years of a 20-year sentence. He was paroled in 1990. Can Nashville detectives tie him to the murders of 7 young people at fast food restaurants in their city? In the interrogation room, detectives can't get straight answers.
He was overly polite, and he seemed to be very much fixated on whether we would like him or not like him.
And you shouldn't be friends. And if I'm the killer and I'm the murderer and I'm the one who's going to execute you, I guess you really shouldn't be my friend either, because it's not right. I'm just trying to say that I just don't want you to be biased. I'm still a human being.
You said if I am the killer. What exactly does that mean? I mean, what?
Well, maybe I can rephrase it another way. Let's say that, let's say I am the killer. I don't want you to just hate me. I still want you to be able to socialize. No, sir. No, sir.
I think to a degree you're messing with us.
No, sir. I'm not trying to play my... I wish you wouldn't have said that, because I don't want to tarnish our relationship.
Very bizarre individual. One of the most bizarre I've ever come across.
I've been in this business for 20 years. There are a few times where the hair on the back of your neck would raise, and that's what I got from this guy. This guy, to me, gives off just an evil aura about him.
Police will need more than a bad feeling to nail Paul Reed for the fast food murders.
And when you guys, I try to really be a little bit more open and communicative with y'all because I really want y'all to see the whole picture. I really want y'all to know the whole story.
Nashville holds its breath as investigators try to tie a 39-year-old Texas parolee to the murders of 7 people at local fast food restaurants. First, the fingerprint found on the video rental card belonging to Captain D's manager, Steve Hampton, matches Paul Reed.
It's jubilation. You've been working on this every single day, 7 days a week, just constantly trying to figure out who did this to these victims. And then you finally get that hit.
Next, Detective Postiglione calls in Jose Gonzalez, the lone survivor of the McDonald's murders.
He was able to make a positive IDs. That's the person who came into McDonald's and did this.
Finally, a search of Reed's home turns up damning evidence in the Baskin-Robbins killings.
We were able to locate blood from both victims in Clarksville on one pair of shoes, so that pretty much connected him to Clarksville as well, so he was connected to all 3.
Pat called and he said, we got him. I just, very happy.
Photos found at Reed's home paint a picture of a man with delusions of grandeur. He had plastic surgery to improve his looks, but he couldn't do anything about his eyes.
His eyes are just dead to me. When you see a great white shark with his eyes, you know, it's kind of the same look.
He moved to Nashville to be a country music star and even had a demo.
He's damaged in some way. God knows as he's self-deluded. There are a lot of bad demo tapes, you know, that have been made, but this one was just incredible. You think, how could this guy think that he was a singer?
Paul Reed is charged with 7 murders. As the trial opens, Reed pleads not guilty. The prosecution outlines Reed's sadistic rampage beginning on February 16, 1997. The day after he was fired from his job at Shoney's.
You convinced the person at Captain D's to open the door just so I can give you this job application. He was very disarming.
I think he learned his lesson not to leave witnesses alive when he did his armed robbery and went to prison in Texas.
5 weeks later, he hits McDonald's.
Stepped out of the shadows with a gun. It's gonna be okay. Let's go back inside the restaurant. I'm just gonna rob everybody and I'll be gone. He was able to convince you that he was not gonna hurt you. And then as soon as you gave in, you were dead. He lost control totally. I think eventually he began to enjoy the killing more so than he did the robbery.
By the time he enters the Baskin-Robbins a month later, Michelle Mays and Angela Holmes don't stand a chance.
One of the victim's brother was coming to pick him up. She may have said something. Got them to go out into his car, and he drove them to Dunbar Cave.
Both girls were being walked down the path to a very dark, secluded area. Michelle knew a friend in the area, in an adjacent neighborhood, and I really believe that she thought if I can run, I can make it to my friend's house and I'll be okay. I think when she tried that, that's when Angela was killed and pushed into the water. Michelle was chased down and killed in the woods.
In separate trials, Paul Reed is found guilty of all 7 murders.
You have been found guilty of first-degree premeditated murder in counts 1, 2, and 3.
And sentenced to die by lethal injection. He shows no emotion. Reed is still on death row, still appealing, still singing the song of an innocent man wrongly convicted.
I did not commit these nefarious homicides. Now, you can believe otherwise. You can believe with the district attorney. But I did not commit these nefarious homicides.
Whether Reed is ever executed, 7 families are left without their child. Nothing is ever over for them.
Steve Hampton was my son. He was the only child I could ever have. I raised him totally by myself, so he was my heart. He was my life. He was what I lived for. He was what I worked for.
You never have closure. I mean, it's always there. Our child will always be gone on this earth. We will never see her again here. And we have to get used to that. We have to know that. We do know that we're going to see her again. She's just living in a much better place than we are, that's for sure. And that's how we get through it.
She's complete. She's back home where she started, and she's complete. And I just kind of leave it there.
This was in her backpack. Pat gave it to me. I've worn it ever since. I think of all she missed. You know, she didn't get to go to her junior prom. She didn't graduate from high school, college, get married, have children. And I miss that for her.
You never get over these cases. Sometimes you do what you can to try to limit your emotions, but when you're dealing with victims like 15 years later.
That breaks her mother's heart.
He asked me if I was Sarah Jackson's mother. And I said yes. And he told me that there'd been a robbery and that they had been found shot in the cooler. And I said, is she dead? And he said, yes. Sarah was your typical teenage girl. She was going to school, working, had just bought a car and had it for 2.5 weeks. And she was the happiest she could be with that car. Just your typical teenager.
Detective Postiglione learns $7,500 in small bills and coins is missing. Not a lot of money to die for.
These victims, we suspect, were convinced that we're going to put you in a cooler, I'm going to rob you, and I'm going to be out of here. They went in there and then they were killed immediately. Didn't have any time to react.
It's an unbelievable scene. Homicide Detective Pat Postiglione is assigned to the case.
You could tell that the victims were shot as they were lying down. They were shot several times each. It is overkill.
The dead employees are 16-year-old Sarah Jackson and the restaurant's manager, 28-year-old Steve Hampton, a father of 3.
Steve was a dad, happily married, having a good life and a good career apparently at Captain D's.
Sarah had been working at the restaurant for 8 months. Across town, a police officer delivers the news.
If you think about what she had to have felt, you know, it's not good.
Who could commit such a heinous crime? A suspect clever enough to lock the door behind him.
Which would give you a lot more time to get away. It's all delaying the discovery of the victims is what that's about.
The execution of Sarah Jackson and Steve Hampton shocks all of Nashville.
It's a tragedy. You don't expect to get out of church on Sunday and find out that one of your members has been shot.
As police are working to piece together what happened, co-workers and friends are just trying to understand why anyone would murder a helpless teenager and a father of 3.
Investigators ask employees if anything unusual happened recently. Staff from the night before say a man came in shortly after. Tara tries calling the restaurant. No answer. Something is wrong. She calls the police. An area manager shows up about 20 minutes later with a key.
Steve! You really can't tell anything had occurred. It's very clean. The cash registers are closed. The safe is closed.
Lunch prep is underway. But where is everyone? The manager makes his way to the back of the restaurant.
Opens up the cooler and he finds the bodies.
Hey! Hey! Hey!
I think about it every day. She really wasn't supposed to be there.
I'm not gonna hurt you.
There's only way to describe it as a sick feeling. They're so innocent.
Tara Anderson arrives for her usual shift at Captain D's. This Sunday, she finds it strange that the door is locked. Her boss should be there by now. And the chairs should be down for the Sunday lunch crowd. But the place looks empty.